Hey, Orion here. I've been podcasting for over 4 years now. 4 years. I started a bit unsure and insecure, but I am so much better and I'm a different woman today. I learned and grew so much. I grew as a person and I grew as a podcast host. And I had the privilege of talking with incredible people I never even imagined I can even reach. But regardless of how famous or not famous my guest is, sometimes you have a special conversation, one that is so stellar, you remember it even 4 years later. Welcome to Stellar Conversations. This is one of my absolute favorite episodes, and it will light up your day.
Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Get inspired and live out loud. From love, freedom, and success to having it all. Here's your host, coach, speaker, and shining star, Orion.
Roger, you're looking good.
Bill Donius is an expert on unlocking the power of the right side of the brain. He is a New York Times best-selling author and wrote the book Thought Revolution about how to think outside of the box, how to think differently. His current clients include Fortune 500 companies such as Walt Disney Studios, Nestle, and Kawasaki. And he provides a great deal of expertise in the areas of ideation and problem solving. Hi, Bill, and welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you because you're a very smart, kind, and progressive man. And my first question is a big question. So I'm looking for a big answer. Can we really, truly live a stellar life? Is this just an illusion? Can we really do it?
That is a great question. I think we all kind of go through life, doing the best we can and thinking we've gotten all we can do, but there is more. And I think there is a way and it sounds oftentimes people, look at the whole self-help genre, personal development world and go, wow, I don't want to do all of that. It's so much work. It's so hard, but it doesn't have to be. And I've found in my own experience dating back 18 years when I learned a version of the process that I wrote the book about is that we can, in fact, go into our own brains and learn more about ourselves, be more aware of who we are, what we are, and most importantly, kind of what limits us in life and why. And once we get that knowledge, we can be more powerful and more intentional in what we do because we're sort of freed from the past, if you will. And we're able to see without those blinders on and go forth in a way that's much better. It's much more exciting. We're much happier and more authentic. And so I think all those words would mean that we can live a more stellar life by learning how to get there and how to learn more about ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. You give us all hope. How did you get into studying the brain? And how did you get into that area of expertise that you teach?
Yeah, well, it came from my greatest weakness because I had to finally, at age 38, fess up to the fact that although some things in life were working really well for me, some things weren't. And I had already taken my company public and a year before, and so work and business and family things were going really well. But in my personal, intimate relationships, things weren't going that well. So I got into therapy with the notion, I think it's finally time that I address this issue because it's very easy to get caught in the trap of believing that things are just going to get better. And it's, in fact, one of the lies that I cite in my book, Thought Revolution, is that, it'll get better or, I'll do it later. And we can just keep postponing this stuff in the hope that against all odds, maybe that something magically is going to happen that's going to all of a sudden, allow us to meet the right person that we've never met before. And so I had to deal with the fact that it was probably me rather than the people that I had dated in the 20 years that I'd been in the dating world. And so in therapy, I learned that there is a way to think differently, and that it's based on Roger Sperry's 1981 Nobel Prize-winning discovery about hemispheric division in the brain. That means that the left side of the brain is responsible for certain functions like logical thinking, linear, mathematical, analytical, and that's 92% of us are right-handed, and so we're kind of left brain is kind of the predominant way we think, and it's, and scientists know we use all of our brain all of the time, but nevertheless, we're kind of oriented in a society where we got to put bills on the, table, put food on the table rather, and keep things going. We're kind of that way. So the right hemisphere is that other part of the brain that's the more artistic, creative, intuitive, musically oriented. And when I learned in therapy, that's also the problem-solving part of the brain. A lot of things clicked for me because when I learned how to tap into the right hemisphere of the brain, it became easier for me to figure out why I was stuck in the first place, like what I had overlooked in my relationships, and why, and get the awareness of the obstacle that I was facing that I didn't know was there. And once I got that and understood that obstacle and kind of worked through it, I was able to get the awareness and then subsequently go forward and not have that be a barrier in future relationships. So it was obviously a huge insight and a very material improvement in the quality of my life, because I was able to enter into an intimate relationship thereafter, and things have been so much better since then. So it took me a couple of years before deciding, wow, I wonder if that same process could be adapted for and used as a business process, because the work had been very extensively used in psychology for 30 years. Dr. Lucia Capagnoni, who I studied with, wrote the book Recovery of Your Inner Child and launched the whole inner child movement in psychology. And then Dr. Betty Edwards launched the whole Drawing on the Right Side of Your Brain book that's still used in art schools. And so I thought, wow, what if we could use something in kind of for the rest of us that don't have something major going on, just want to maybe live a more stellar, better, more intentional life? What could we do? And so it was with that notion that 8 years ago, after being able to retire early at 50, that I did the deep dive and the interviews that resulted in the book. But I found that, there is this other part of the brain that can help us get the answers to the questions and the problems we've just been unable to solve. It's like a lot of us go through life, and me included, with the blinders on, and we get stuck in these habits and routines, and we just don't know how to break through. We read books and people can tell us, motivational speakers will say, hey, just work harder, get up earlier. You have to have the desire to
step up.
Yeah. And so all that is great. But if there's a psychological barrier or block, that isn't enough to sustain you every day to kind of get through that. So you need to understand what the block or barrier is in the first place. So I really saw that in those 200 interviews that I did, that we all have things going on that prevent us from getting to where we want to get to, from getting to that, to use your term, which I love, a more stellar life.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I just heard a TEDx Talk talking about a Harvard study that was conducted over 75 years, where they took about 700 plus subjects and they researched the cause of happiness, what makes people really happy and alive, and help them with longevity. And when they asked millennials what they want to achieve in life, it was either be successful or be famous. But the study actually shows that the quality of your relationship and your social setting is what makes you happy. Being surrounded by friends, the quality of your relationship, eventually at the end of the day, after money and fame and of course health, that would help people live a happier, fulfilled life. So how do you feel doing all the work that you did affected your own personal relationship?
Well, it made it possible because it's the simple answer, because I also saw that study and think it's terrific and I saw that it took like 5 different principal investigators over that time frame to, of course, because it was over 75 years to continue that work. So it's really a great gift to all of us to understand that. And I think that, we oftentimes get in that trap of just doing the same things over and over again. And as Einstein said, if we do that and we expect a different result, then that may be rather insane, right? I mean, that something would just automatically get better. So when it comes to, most importantly, when it comes to our intimate personal relationships with our partners, significant others, husbands, wives, family members, those relationships, as the study shows, are like the most important, obviously. So if we've got some problems in those relationships, then that can potentially prevent us from being happier. Mm-hmm. And so solving those is a high priority. But yet, in the work that I did in those interviews, it really showed how, some people can go years and decades and be in poor relationships that don't serve them well. Mm-hmm. So how do we learn and how do we grow? And for me, I was, in a series of very short-term relationships because I just couldn't function well in intimate relationships. And so just to be in one now is fantastic because it feels, so much better to have that quality, to improve that quality of life.
Mm-hmm. And you have a TEDx Talk, Unlocking Your Brain's Hidden App.
Correct.
Right. And it's really good. And I recommend everybody to go and watch it.
Thank you.
How do we do that? I didn't know we have a hidden app that I can unlock. How can I unlock it?
Great. And I was trying to be a little clever. and because, apps are something, but I like the kind of metaphor there that an app suggests, because we're all, I have some friends that have hundreds of apps on their phone. And, they're app collectors. And so we like the notion that an app, we can get an app, download it really quickly for free, and it's going to solve our problems.
Yeah.
I thought, well, in the work that I had done in all these 18 years of my personal experience and then 8 years working in the public one-on-one and with big companies, small companies, I thought, wow, I guess we could consider that other half of our brain, that right hemisphere of our brain, is potentially an app. Because it's an application that we can learn, go to, get answers quickly, and then use them to improve the quality of our life. So I thought, wow, this app, if we can unlock that app, that's much more important than unlocking some game app that's going to just maybe amuse us for a couple minutes and not really change the quality of our life. And so that was the basis for titling it that way. And then in the TED Talk, I do describe how to do this. So I didn't want people to feel like, this is all he is trying to do is get us to buy the book. I wanted, obviously authors don't make much on book sales when they're produced, in the traditional way. And Simon & Schuster was my publisher. So it's great to have it out there. But I wanted to show in the TED Talk that how to do it, and I explain actually how to do it in the talk so that people can experience what this is like for themselves, and so there is an opportunity for people to experience it and do that, and then they can judge for themselves if it works for them.
Mm-hmm. And does the work you do work equally well in right-handed or left-handed people?
It does. The theory is actually there's some split in the scientific community about handedness, and then it's widely thought that the left side of the brain controls the opposite side or the right side of the body. So when Gabby Giffords, when that bullet went through her brain, it went through the left hemisphere of her brain, which knocked out grammar and language and all those and all those skill sets. But the brain also has the neuroplasticity that it kind of can relearn some of that stuff. But so the right side of the brain is controlled by the left side of the body. But the distinction that some scientists feel and believe is that when it comes to activating the right hemisphere of the brain, it is dependent on the non-dominant hand. So be it either left or right hand, it's whichever one is non-dominant is the pathway to the right hemisphere of the brain. So I think that I sort of was able to corroborate that in my work and my interviews, those 200 that I did initially. I was able to see that regardless of handedness, when people use their non-dominant hand, there seemed to be an activation of the neural pathway to the right hemisphere, because the proof was really in the pudding. They got different, interesting, and then I would say more creative answers when they were using their non-dominant hand, regardless of handedness. The only exception to that was I did run across a very small portion, because there are only 1% of the population of people that are, that are able to use both hands. I was going to say bilingual, but I meant ambidextrous. And they are able to use both hands, and they were able to seemingly, gain equal access, using really either hand. And in one case, she was a famous novelist. She writes her novels long-handed while simultaneously editing in the margin with her other hand, with her left. So, it was widely known that Leonardo da Vinci was able to draw with one hand and paint with the other simultaneously. I have his book, and so I could. It's amazing, though, right? That to think that our brain is able to do two things at once is astounding. But so there's so much that our brains can do, and in fact, I uncovered in the research that the scientists widely believe that the brain is the least, that 3-pound organ is the least understood organ piece of matter in the entire universe. I mean, we still, all these years later, we still don't know. They don't know, I should say. The scientific community doesn't know fully how our brains work.
Yeah, I was always fascinated with the brain and how it works and how we can tap into our peak potential. And it seems like an endless seeking. It's not an easy task. It's something that reveals itself more and more every day, and still, I think like 99% is unknown or really unexplained.
And exactly. And some people, said to me, who are you to try to write a book about all this? And I said, it's from that very humble perspective of a user. I view this as a user's manual for the brain. And it's not the scientific journal on how the brain works. Mm-hmm. It's a book about how we can use our brains to make them work better for us. Mm-hmm. So I took that as a businessman and former CEO myself, that, it's about how, as we said at the top of the program, it's about how to live a more stellar life. So I am just trying to share what worked for me and what I found in my research, what worked for others. So this is a kind of user's manual that, and there are 55 questions in there. So people can get used to, how to use it, how it works, and just start doing it.
Right. And can you expand a little bit about what is so special about the right side of the brain?
Sure. It is the place that the scientists describe as, that place of genius. And the distinction here is, we think of Einstein as a genius, and he clearly is. But I think the distinction here is that we all have that genius. We all have a type of inner genius. And, clearly we're not as smart as Einstein, but we have that genius that applies to who we are and the insights that we can get, because it relates to that higher consciousness that is present in all of us, but is hard to get to. So this is, for instance, like those moments in the shower where we get that aha idea, mm-hmm. or driving down a country road with music playing. We go, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we did this or that? Mm-hmm. And so we have those fleeting moments that occur where we think, wow, that was a big idea that I just had. But we're disappointed that it doesn't happen regularly enough. And so activating, being able to activate the neural pathway to go there, that right hemisphere, which is creativity, artistry, music, the big ideas, the aha moments, the insights, the intuitive thoughts, those gut thoughts that we tend to, when we were in the caveman era, when we had a gut thought that there might be danger ahead, we paid attention to it, because if we didn't, we might lose our life, right? So now, though, we kind of ignore those gut thoughts because they all have to be rational and linear and analyzed. And so we're in a much more analytical world. But the artists of our world, and when we look at creativity and we look at people that create beautiful music or paintings or have big ideas to start companies or do something clever and interesting that no one's ever thought of before, whether it's Facebook or Google or, or Twitter or where do those ideas come from? My thesis is they come from a combination of left and right brain, but I think they're kind of activated in the right hemisphere of the brain. And it's just this big kind of amazing, mysterious kind of cool place. Another great TED Talk to listen to, by the way, is the one that was given titled "My Stroke of Insight," and it was given by Harvard psychologist Dr. Jill Bolte, or Jill Bolte Taylor, rather, who had a stroke and herself while doing scientific research, and then was in this place of this stroke, kind of just in this place for 7 years, and was out of it for 7 years in her quote right brain. And then she came to and came conscious and was able to go back and remember and talk about what all that was like. So it's interesting that she's able to literally describe what it's like to kind of be in your right brain. So and what I like about that is it's like gives us a sense about what that's like. Unfortunately, none of us want to have a stroke to experience that. That's a little too extreme. So my thought, and after watching that and years later, was, wow, what if we could get to that place without having a stroke and get the insights that we need to get that are there for us, on an everyday basis. We could do it once a day, 10 times a day if we wanted to, or once a month, whatever time frame we want. And we're looking for that inspiration. We can go there and get it.
Right. And that's a good metaphor for life. How can we get to the lesson without the pain in general? Because we just wait till something really bad happens for us to get any insight or grow. So it will be a good preventive medicine for life.
And if we listen to our physical trainers, and there's that famous slogan, no pain, no gain. So there's this notion that we have to suffer, and most of us, and including me, and I waited until I was age 38 and suffered a lot, and worse, made a lot of other people suffer. We feel like the road of suffering is noble, and it's what we need to do, and we've suffered long enough. We can finally get the breakthrough.
Yeah, we deserve it finally.
Yeah, and that's fine. If you want to take that script and adhere to it, that's fine, but it doesn't have to be that way. We don't need, and that's why one of the things that I like doing most is taking this work into colleges and grade schools and high schools, because I don't want them to go through and suffer as long as I did before they can, learn how to think differently, tap into their inner genius, learn how to, be a better person, a more intentional person, a more authentic person. Wouldn't that be great to have that in high schools? Because look at all the, crap, to use that word, that they have to go through in high school. And it's not necessarily a fun, great place for a lot of people. So, to be able to get that wisdom earlier would be fantastic, right?
Absolutely agree. And it's also seemed that when we're young, our right brain, our creative side is more open. I know that when I was in high school in my very early 20s, I wrote poetry, and then I stopped. And I look back at what I wrote, and I look at it, and I'm like, that's pretty good. And I feel like I cannot do it again. Like that part of me is kind of shut down.
Well, you open it up, Orion. You can do it. And what I use now is a writer prompt, or as an editorial tool is I use my right brain for that. And so you can, for instance, you can say to yourself, okay, what do I want to write a poem about? What do I want to creatively express? And then allow this process to take over and see what happens. I would invite you to try that and see what you get, because I'm convinced from my own work and from doing this with others that you can tap into that more creative, more intuitive source and get the big idea about what the topic matter is first. But then I think you can even get poetic verse on how to express that. Mm-hmm. And just allow to go be in that state of flow where you activate the right brain and let that stuff flow out. So I would love to get a follow-up call from you and say, wow, it's working for me. I will.
You will get one, by the way.
I'll comment on the research that I did. I discovered that NASA went looking for those for who they should put in their creative innovation groups. And they did a massive study of hundreds of thousands of people, and to align with what you just said. And they found one group that actually scored the highest in these creativity tests. And you won't be surprised to find that group was comprised of 5-year-olds.
Wow.
So they couldn't hire them, but they did. So they found, seriously, they found that 5-year-olds scored at the 98th percentile on the same test that the average adult, average age 31, scored I think it was a 2%.
Wow.
So it was really a dismal result where you can see, and the 15-year-olds did better than the 20-year-olds did better than the 25. So it was just a straight line down in terms of creative results from this finding. So there is, it's really sad and disappointing, and you can get really discouraged by that, unless you begin to tap into that other place and kind of find that there is more, that we can, use our brains in a much more powerful way and activate that neural pathway, get to the right brain, get those ideas that are there for us. And the great part is it's like far easier than learning French or Spanish or a language. It's far easier than having to go to get your MBA or do all these other things that we do to try to improve our lives. And, so I think that's part of the problem. This is almost deceptively simple and easy. And so it can be dismissed because people think, oh, it can't be that easy. It's got to be hard, right? There's got to be pain involved for this to be valuable. So a lot of people tend to potentially dismiss it because they think it's too easy.
Right. So I'm sure our listeners are so curious about the process itself. Can you describe or teach us a little bit about the process?
Yeah. In fact, I'll invite your listeners to grab a pencil or pen and a paper and follow along, because I think that the best way to do this, and for you too, Orion, to do this in real time.
I'm grabbing it.
Okay. The best way to do this is just to experience it. Now, admittedly, there's a lot more preamble to the science behind all this in my TEDx talk. So Unlocking the Brain's Hidden App. So people may want to watch that first or not, depending on whatever, but we'll just jump right in. So the best way to experience this is in this simple exercise I've devised to really show and explain how the brain works. So what I want to do is ask you the question, and your listeners the question: if I were an animal, what animal would I be as it pertains to yourself? Write down with your presumably dominant hand whatever answer you deem to be the most appropriate, best answer to that question.
I just did.
Okay. Now, as they say in Monty Python, for something completely different, I want you to switch hands,
okay,
put the pen or pencil in your non-dominant hand, and as a starting point, just write your name, either cursively or printed, just to show that and to prove to yourself, basically, that you can do it. Because for most of us, we hardly ever use that hand to write or print anything. I do think that, as an aside, one of the reasons that our society is more productive is that we have learned as a society to type with both hands, most of us. And so in my generation, I turned in papers to a typist in business school who typed them, and then I turned them in. So I was handwriting my papers with my dominant right hand. So I never really got my left hand involved doing a whole lot until I started typing and learned to type years later. But now everybody basically knows how to type with both hands. So I think it's helped activate the right brain, in part just simply because we're using that hand more. Unlike the kind of just the physical act and the motor skill act of typing, for this to work, you need to suspend disbelief. I'm going to ask you a question and allow yourself with the pen in that non-dominant hand to write whatever comes to mind without judgment, without thinking about it. So what we hope to have happen here is that you can suspend disbelief long enough that you can hear the question, allow the activation to occur from your non-dominant hand to right brain for an answer to flow forth without you thinking about it. Some people say they see it, they feel it, they don't know where it comes from. Just write it down on the page. It may help to maybe close your eyes for a second to reset your brain. You can take a couple deep breaths, no judgment. You can open your eyes, obviously, to write down your answer. The question is, if I were an animal, what animal would I be? Bam. Write it down as it applies to yourself. If I were an animal, what animal would I be? Bam.
I got it.
Okay. So if you're willing to share with me and your audience what you wrote down.
Absolutely. So when I wrote it on my right hand, it was a lioness. And on my left hand, it was actually a visual of a dolphin.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm trying to interest some universities on doing further research on what these answers mean. At this point, I just have a hypothesis. I did it with those initial 200, and I've worked with probably 13,000 people since over the last 8 years in big groups, small groups. So my hypothesis about this is what we write with our dominant hand is a proxy for our conventional thinking. So when you think about that, we answer it in a way that's maybe aspirational. And you may have been saying, wow, if I could be, even though the question was if I were, an animal, what animal would I be? So you aspire perhaps to be a lioness, and gosh, why wouldn't you, right? It's a great, powerful animal, so that's cool. Then, however, something very different happens when we switch hands. It's like we're switching brains, and the right side of the brain takes over and Sperry's discovery was also about the independence of hemispheric division in the brain, so that essentially the left brain is independent from the right brain. It's connected by the limbic system, the corpus callosum, and all this other stuff. And we use, both sides all the time, but there is this independence that exists. And so it's almost as if because you were using your non-dominant hand, you activated the neural pathway and you did, in fact, get an independent and different answer, dolphin. Mm-hmm. And what you got with dolphin is, in my hypothesis, an answer that ends up being much more representational for how you are in life. Mm-hmm. So I would go back to you now and say, hearing that, what would you say in terms of, and what would those that know you best, your husband and friends and relatives, would they say you're more like in life a lioness or a dolphin?
That's a really good question. I believe in totem animals. And when I go to my special place in my brain through a meditation, sometimes different totem animals come, and dolphin is one that appears a lot. Also, what's really interesting is when we met you at the Next Level Experience, and we did the same exercise, I cannot remember my right hand answer, my logical answer, but it was the same answer on my left hand, which was a dolphin. It was very interesting to me that it is consistent.
I wouldn't be surprised by that necessarily, because I think that animal can change over time, and I think it represents maybe objective, in a way, view from the right brain for kind of how we function, but either on a literal or metaphorical basis. I mean, there is when you think of what a dolphin does and how it behaves in schools and is playful and loves the water and is presumably friendly and smart, and that's cool, but that no one would ever necessarily, which is interesting, right, put a dolphin and a lioness in the same category, right? Because they're so different. It is a footnote and sidebar. What I enjoy doing in groups when I work with teams, I divide them when we get to the breakout session by their inner animal.
Wow.
By the non-dominant animal. So what I find is that there is tremendous synergy between animals that swim together, ones that run fast, that fly, that walk slow. And it's really amazing because it's not based on physical type at all. They can look at all these different ways, but they have this great sense of cooperation and understanding one another. And as an experiment, and I can't do this with corporate clients, certainly, but in university settings, I've experimentally taken animals that walk slow and then put them into a group of animals that run fast and then see how they do in terms of that group reaching consensus. And it's been interesting to see that they don't feel like they fit in as well, or they connect to the other people as well. It's a different rhythm, a different pacing. So I think there's a lot to this. And I'm somewhat familiar with the totem animal notion. I've got a book on it, and I've looked at my own inner animal, which is bear.
Ooh, bear is beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense for me because, when I thought about the last 8 years, I would, come out of my cave at spring roaring, if you will. But then again, I very much enjoy the hibernation process of writing the book and the updates, which was 4 years of my life. And I like being in the home office and working on that kind of quietly and meditatively. And so, so I think there is something to all of that. As you know, and I'm sure you've discovered in your life and your work and your program is great for that, is that there's so much more to life. We tend to get trapped in just living an ordinary life instead of living a stellar life. And so there's all this stuff out there for us to be able to experience and explore and learn. There's a big, fascinating world out there for us.
Isn't that exciting? More to answer your question, I love dolphins. I really feel like some of the traits are similar to who I am, especially the playfulness. And you had an interview with my fiance Stefan, and his right brain animal is a whale. So I'm a dolphin, he's a whale. We swim together, and it's all good.
That's great. Now, I would add here that sometimes people tend to think that this is just kind of a fun, in which it is a playful exercise that kind of ends right there, which is in fact the beginning of a process of learning more about ourselves. I mean, I think other great questions to put to the right brain would be, what should my to-do list for today be? Maybe a question, why do I always get upset when my boyfriend does this? Or why do I not like my mother-in-law? Why haven't I lost weight? What is my highest and best purpose in life be? Why do I keep doing the same thing over and over again as it applies to this, expecting a different result? So we can use this question in this process of tapping into the right brain and use question by question to learn more about ourselves, which is the real point of doing this, because there is an opportunity to get an independent, fresh, creative, intuitive, and potentially also better answer than we've been getting, especially if the answer we've been getting isn't really working for us and we're stuck. Then why not try a different path and go to a different place in our brain to see what other answers might, show up, and see, in fact, if there is a better way for us to be thinking about how to solve a particular problem.
Right. And I've been experimenting with left-hand writing. About 5 days ago, I went to the beach and I spent about 25 minutes writing, because I'm right now seeking the question, what do I really want? And every day, my intention is, what do I really want? Just to crystallize my vision. And every day is about a different area of my life. And it was extraordinary because the setting was beautiful. It was a beautiful day. And I was just writing and writing. And the answer that came was very heartfelt rather than logical. And it seems like as soon as I started, it didn't stop. I was just writing and writing and writing. It was really fun. What I also found is that when I'm in a lower state, when I'm angry or sad, if I do left-hand writing, the answers are not as good. They're not very much in alignment. They're not coming from a place of higher vibration. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think that, one, I love the fact that you're being intentional about this, and also intentional about trying to live in an intentional manner in your life, because I think that's so important. It's so easy to get swept this way or swept that way. And, kind of do what the group wants or our spouse wants. And so I think that's awesome. I would describe it as, just for clarity, as non-dominant handwriting, because for left-hand dominant people, for them, it's going to be their right hands. But I think I would invite all of us to get into the habit, and whatever that habit might be, but I think it's great to get into the habit at least weekly, at least once a week, even if it's for 15 minutes, to find sort of a sacred place in the week's calendar, whether it's a Tuesday morning or a Sunday night, to create that moment of peace and quiet for us where we can be reflective, introspective, and really try to figure out like what's working in our life, what isn't, what we want, what we want more of. And then this process, if people find it useful, is a great one. And there, as I mentioned, there's 55 questions in the book, so they can be an expert at it by the time they're done with those 55 questions. Mm-hmm. Not that they have to even do all of them, but this process has worked for me these 18 years at really, really getting clear on like how I can make improvements at my company, which worked great for me and allowed me to retire at 50. How I can make improvements in my personal life with interpersonal relationships, who I should hire, maybe who I should not hire, why I'm having difficulty maybe in a friendship with somebody, why this keeps coming up, and where we get into arguments. And all these things can be really good. And I just invite whatever the process you might want to use is kind of less important than just finding a process that works for you and using that. And we don't, it's great to be able to, and you're blessed to be able to go to the beach.
Yes, I do.
And for some of us, it may just be going into a quiet space in the house or apartment and lighting a candle, having a moment of reflection, and just creating that moment with a journal. I do think it's important to be capturing these thoughts down in something, because too often things just float around in our brain, and they do it all week long. So being able to capture something in writing is good. And in my view, being able to capture the right brain ideas with the non-dominant hand is even an extra bonus, because they are as you said, so much more insightful and deeper and more higher level thoughts and much more significant, creative. So I think you're onto something there.
And I want to expand more about intention and the quality of the questions and the quality of your state when you do it. What's the difference between doing a non-dominant handwriting in a bad state or in a good state, or asking a good question or a bad question?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it's better to be doing it than not doing it at all is point number one. And then number two is that when we get practiced at anything, whether it's riding a bike or speaking a language, we get better at it, right? So I think that it's easier to do this work when we're in a more relaxed, comfortable, quiet state, because our brain is sort of quieted down and we can get to that place more easily. So that's probably the ideal place to learn how to do it. However, I found, and I've been doing it now for 18 years, so some of the times, ironically for me, that it's most useful is when I am worked up about something, or I've had an argument, or I'm in this tense state. I say, okay, what's going on? I write the question to myself, because I find it helpful to write it down so that I can see it, write the question specifically, and then look at it, read it, and then allow my brain to answer it, being activated through the non-dominant hand. And I find that it's really helpful, because I'll get an insight then in that moment that I might not get in the frustration and the anxiety of the moment otherwise.
Right. And what if you get two different answers?
Great. I mean, that's an opportunity for that big, powerful brain to reconcile what makes the most sense. There's I kind of, in my corporate groups, I share that I'm agnostic about where a good idea comes from, left side, right side, middle, whatever. The goal is really just to get an idea that's going to make sense, help us get the wisdom to work through a problem, and gain the awareness of why that problem exists, perhaps in the first place. So I think our brains know when we're looking at a set of answers, what one really resonates as the most significant, best answer. We'll be able to pick up on that pretty quickly, I think. So having more choices is normally better, because there's more for us to consider and choose from.
Right. Can you share with us a case study where you helped somebody get a big idea?
Sure. This study is in the book. A lot of the work that I do with the Fortune 100, obviously is confidential and I can't speak about, but I did get permission from Matt Matthews, the CEO of Crown Vision, to use this story. And it was one of the first companies that I worked with, and they were in the business and are in the business of selling eyeglasses, and they also do LASIK surgery around the multiple state area in the Midwest. And they were looking for, in 2009 for just how they could improve their bottom line and what they could do better differently in these stores. And so we gathered 43 managers together for a strategy retreat, which was in and of itself a little bit different because they normally gather the top 6 executive officers. And I said, I'd like to make it broader and include the more perspectives and more diverse perspectives, but also not just the left and right brains perspectives, but also more perspectives. And so in that session, we asked a lot of questions about the company. What could they do different? What could they do better? What are they missing? What would they do if they started the company from scratch? And in the 4-hour session at the end, they had discovered 3 or 4 ideas that ultimately led to a 19% bottom line increase for the company. So it resulted in millions of dollars in additional profit. And so obviously the CEO was very happy, the team was very happy, and they've sustained that. And they use this process now as part of their strategic thinking in the company. But they unlocked the reason why they were not successful at selling eyewear at the upper end of the market, which was something that had eluded them for the entire 16 years that Matt owned the company, but also they had been in business, I think, for 40. So it was a pretty big breakthrough insight that they got. And so that was really helpful for them. So that's a corporate example. On a personal example, I was working with a Mensa, a very gifted Mensa member who had risen up in 4 different companies to a very high level before being terminated. And he was in his, early 40s and couldn't figure out what was going on. And his wife obviously was really upset as well that he, matriculate through the organization, reach this kind of high level, doing well, getting paid well, and then get terminated. And he knew what was happening, and that was that he would end up saying something, doing something that would ultimately get him fired. But he didn't know why he was doing that. And in the work that we did in delving into what was going on, we figured out the why. And the why was that he had, at age 13, in a discussion and a problem, we pinned it down to a sentence that his father said to him at age 13. And that sent him forth on a, decades-long journey of trying to rebuke, refute, and get even with authority figures. And so our brains are just so amazing. We know that when people have been physically abused, sexually abused, it haunts them until they can reconcile those issues for the rest of their lives and relationships. And so similarly to other things happen that may be fast, but they could have a very deep and long-lasting psychological impact. So a lot of these things are very deeply rooted psychological issues. And if they're really deep and problematic, therapy is advised and suggested, certainly. But sometimes we can unearth what some of these are, and then we may need help in therapy working them out. But we just oftentimes get trapped, and we tell ourselves a lie for so long that we believe it, and we just accept it as so, and we don't know how to work out of it. So there's so much that's possible about why we're not losing weight, why we're staying in a bad relationship, why we're not being successful in business, why we don't like our mother-in-law, why we are afraid to travel abroad, whatever it might be. There are, these things aren't just random. I mean, there are reasons why these things all exist, right? We just haven't discovered the reason, which is why we stay trapped and stay stuck.
Right. My work with women sometimes involved connection into feminine empowerment. just tapping into that inner feminine power. So from my understanding, the theory is that the left side is connected more with masculine traits, more focus, direction, being assertive, and the right brain is more with feminine traits that are creative, flow. Are the results different in men and women? And can this type of work really help women step into a state of empowerment?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think of it as the kind of polarity that exists within all of us between feminine and masculine energies. And so I guess if you want to ascribe those traits that you described as being more feminine as right hemisphere related, that's fine. I mean, I think there is some evidence to that in society that women are better at those things, but and yet we have all kinds of evidence as well with all the great visual artists as well as musical artists that are men that are obviously being able to be in touch very much with that right side and source ideas and creativity from that place. I think that it can help all. I mean, and I noticed in the work that I did in all those interviews that were mixed almost evenly between men and women that, I think this is just a way of getting to that higher place, that higher consciousness that is helpful for all of us, be it, for male or female. It's a better, it's a sort of a better way to think because it's an additional kind of independent place we can get to just get, those kind of different thoughts that we don't get as commonly and as regularly.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much. I actually have about a million more questions for you, but this is the end. And
so Ryan, maybe we could meet again on another podcast when perhaps listeners can tap in and tell us like what they want us to talk about, and maybe they can write in some questions to you, and it would be great to respond to podcast questions that surface over in the next 6 months or a year, and then follow up if you're so inclined.
Yeah, definitely. It's a wonderful idea. And before we finish, how can our listeners find you and learn more from you?
Sure. I have a Facebook page, William A. Donius, a website, williamdonius.com, a LinkedIn page, William Bill Donius. So I think those are all great places to find me. That you can contact me through all of those places. And I do. One of the things that I enjoy is interacting with readers, with those who have questions, with people that want to follow up, and we can get into email dialogues or phone dialogues. And I found that it's I'm able to help them, and it's rewarding to do so. I enjoy it. I learn from them, and hopefully they're getting something out of it as well, and learning a little bit along the way. So it's been a great exchange.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your kindness and for your generosity. It was my honor and my pleasure talking to you. Thank you very, very much.
Same goes, Orion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you very much, listeners. This was incredible. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. Go on, enjoy your day, and have a stellar life. Thank you for joining me on my mission to light people up and change lives around the world. I hope today's conversation inspires you to step up, go after the life of your dreams, and be who you want to be. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go to stellarlifepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and other cool stuff. And please subscribe, review, and help spread the word by sharing us on Facebook and Twitter. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next episode.